Do you have a workers' compensation case and you want to know what kind of case do I have? What's the different types of injuries in workers' comp? Well, stay tuned. I'm about to go over specific injury and cumulative trauma. And if you watch to the end, you will have a bonus tip as well. Hi, my name is Naomi Gonzalez. I'm an attorney practicing in California since 2012. So you have an injury and you don't know if it's a specific injury or a cumulative trauma or how you should claim it or if you should claim it at all. So let me go over the two types with you. A specific injury is something happens at work on a specific day and you know you're injured right away. You slip, fall, break your leg, you know you're injured right away. You might have gotten into a car accident as you're driving or a truck accident, and as you get into that accident, you hurt your neck or your shoulder or your back, but you know you're injured right away, you know how it happened. Maybe you were in the warehouse and a big box fell on your head, you got a concussion or hurt your neck or your back. Well, then that's a specific injury as well. Or maybe you were cutting wood and you accidentally cut your hand or your finger or your thumb off, or maybe you got your foot or your toe amputated. Those are all specific injuries. So what happens is when you have a specific injury, you should be able to tell somebody, especially at a deposition, exactly what happened. Where were you? Who was present? What were you doing? And then what happens is you're able to say what your body was doing at the time it was injured. So you might have been lifting a box and you felt a pop in your back, or maybe you fell and you fell on your face, or maybe you fell on your back, maybe you fell on your side. So you should be able to describe exactly how the injury took place for a specific injury. You could also have psychological for a specific injury. In that case, it's going to be a lot. It has to be something that's pretty intense, usually, to cause psychological damage, such as you were held up at gunpoint, or you were assaulted, beat up, or maybe you witnessed something that was very traumatic, something very violent, something like that. That might come to the level of a psychological injury. So if this happened to you, it doesn't necessarily mean you have a psychological injury claim. It has to have caused actual injury to you. In other words, you need to have started experiencing symptoms. Psychological could be depression, it could be anxiety, it could be PTSD. Whatever the symptoms are, you need to have felt them, as opposed to somebody else may have seen the same thing or witnessed the same thing, but maybe they didn't have any psychological damage. So it's not about what you're witnessing, it's about what happened to you as a result. It is possible that your work injury causes your death. In that case, your surviving dependents do have an action, a death claim. In that instance, you should call us right away because there are time limits on that, and we do not want your beneficiaries to lose out on any benefits. But technically speaking, death benefits are not specific injuries because they are a separate claim than the workers' compensation claim. So it's a little bit different.
The other kind of injury is a cumulative trauma, or sometimes it's called continuous trauma. That's the kind of injury that happens over a period of time. Now, these injuries can happen from your job duties, doing them repetitively. They can happen from environmental sources, or they could happen from your body position as you are working. So let me go through each of those. First, you have continuous trauma based on doing your job duties repeatedly. The classic example is carpal tunnel, where you are typing, and over time you have carpal tunnel here or cubital tunnel on your elbow. And that can happen not just on one day, but if somebody asks you, when were you injured, you can't give them an exact date. You can only tell them about when you remember starting to feel pain. So that's a classic example. But what we see a lot of times is actually warehouse workers. They're having to constantly lift. They may have to lift something from the ground and put it on a pallet up high. They might actually have to transport sideways a lot and twisting action. There's a lot that they have to do, and the size of the box may not be that big. They might be 20 pounds, they might be 50 pounds, sometimes we see 100 pounds. But even if it's a smaller size or weight box, sometimes over time that's still gonna cause injury. It could be your back, your shoulders, your neck, or sometimes if you have to really reach down and pull up, you're gonna actually have injury to your knees as well. Or if your job requires you to work a lot on your knees, that could be something as well. That's kind of going towards the body position, where if your job has to do a lot on your knees, you could be a floor, somebody who lays the floor out. You could be a polisher that you have to do it on your knees. It could be a plumber that you're working under the sink. It could be a lot of things, but if you're having to work on your knees, or if you have to climb stairs constantly up or down, that's going to take a toll on your knees. As well as if you are in a body position where you are sitting there and typing, but you're kind of slumped back or maybe forward, maybe you're sitting up, but your neck's forward. So however your body position is, it does put pressure on different points in your spine, and it can cause injury over time, especially if it's a long period of time that you are constantly in this body position. The other kind of injury we see is when you have to be on your feet constantly. That has to do any kind of worker that is constantly on their feet, especially for an extended period of time. If they are having a 12-hour shift as opposed to just 8 hours, that can cause injury over time to their feet. It could cause neuropathy going up as well. It can cause injury to their back as well. So there's a lot that can go on there as well. The truck drivers, we see their body position causes injury from over time, the way that their spine is aligned, and different ways that they have to drive the truck, whether that's pushing the clutch in, whether that's having to have their arm positioned a certain way, that kind of thing. A different kind of repetitive job duty is when you have to hold on to tools or tools that are moving in certain ways. So we see that when people are, the construction workers are maybe using the jack, they might be having to use heavy materials or tools, and it causes a lot of gripping and a lot of shaking, and that can cause injury to the body pretty quickly. The other kind of injury is environmental. So this happens when it's nothing you're actually doing, it's that you're having to work in a certain environment. That can happen with a sand polisher. Maybe you're polishing guitars or other equipment, and the polish is actually causing some remnants of the material to go into the air. Very, very fine remnants. Even if you have a mask on, it might actually go through the mask or around the mask, and now you're starting to breathe that in. And that can get into your lungs and cause damage. Other kinds are painters. Painters, usually you can't do much about that. They might wear masks too, but they're breathing in this paint. And especially if it is over a long period of time, let's say you're painting for 15 years, well, that's going to cause some problems in your lungs most likely. Other things is sometimes you see people working with asbestos or mold and that kind of thing. Maybe you are an inspector and you have to go into people's attics and you're breathing in maybe mice or rat droppings as well. Like, it can be portions are airborne. So things can happen where over time you're exposed to different environmental things that cause injury to your internal body.
Now, sometimes a case might have both elements. So I'm going to go through a few examples for you. Let's say you're a truck driver and you're driving, you have an injury that happens over time because as you're sitting there and driving, you're constantly having maybe a bad shocks or whatever. You're constantly feeling that jolt on your body. You're constantly sitting maybe forward, back, whichever direction that your body is, you're putting pressure on your spine. And now you're having pain in your neck, your shoulders, your back, your mid-back, low back, maybe your knees. You're pushing the clutch a lot. You know, that happens over time. There's nothing specific that happened on a day, but it just over time you start to have pain in these areas where you didn't have pain or other symptoms before. At the same time, you might be experiencing these, and one day you are trying to step down from your truck and you slip and you fall on your back. Now you have a specific injury in addition to the cumulative trauma, and you might have hit your head. You might have had, head or brain injury. You might have fallen on your wrist and broke your wrist. There's, it could have been a specific injury and a cumulative trauma. And for cumulative trauma, you want to designate a start and end date on there for claim purposes, and your attorney should be helping you choose that because there are general guidelines that we do go by. Another kind of job that's, for an example, let's say that you are an office worker and you have been typing. Now you're getting the carpal tunnel in your wrist, but one day you have to refill the paper on the printer, and so you pick up a big thing of paper and you feel like a hit or a pop on your back and you feel instant pain. Well, that would be a specific injury, and that happens all the time. So now you have two claims. You have one over time for your wrist, and you also have one that happened on a specific day for your back, and that happens as well. So let's say you are a nurse and you go around all day, you spend 12 hours a day on your feet helping everybody out, all the different patients, moving from one area to another. A common thing we see for cumulative trauma for nurses is their feet. That from standing the whole time and moving, they start to have symptoms and they get diagnosed, and that would be covered under workers' compensation. Then let's say on a specific day, they actually get exposed to a needle containing HIV and it breaks through maybe their glove or however, and they get exposed to it. Now that exposure, they might end up getting HIV, which would be very unfortunate, but that would also be a specific injury. And the psychological effect of that, if that does cause psychological injury, that's something that might be recoverable as well through workers' compensation. So lots of times there might be elements of both claims.
Your bonus tip is compensable consequence injuries. A compensable consequence injury can actually happen after a specific injury or a cumulative trauma. Basically what it means is you have injury or pain to a different body part than you are claiming or that you believe was caused from work. But the reason you're having pain in the other body part is because you're compensating for a claimed part. Now, the classic example is you blow out your right knee, so now you're starting to walk with a limp, and now your left knee is starting to hurt. And now that can happen at the very beginning of your claim, or it can happen a year into it or more, depending on if there was any change. What I mean by change is lots of times when you have a surgery, let's say you had to have a surgery on your right knee, now where you were compensating a little bit on the left, now maybe you are completely immobilized on that side as you recover, and now your left has to really do double duty and try to push and pull your weight, and now the left is starting to have pain. So that's a pretty classic example. But the other example is your shoulders. These are pretty common, where somebody has a shoulder injury and you can't lift above your head, so now you're using your other side to do everything on this side. Or if it's a grip injury where you can't really open jars or do writing or anything on one side, now your other side starts to do that and you're doing a lot more gripping, and the other side might start to have pain as well. So these are pretty common, and if you are experiencing pain in a different body part, you need to tell your attorney right away. That's because the sooner you can claim the other body part and amend your application to include it, the sooner they can try to get it accepted. The longer you take to actually claim that body part, the more likely it is that the case or that body part will be denied by the insurance company, and the harder it is for a neutral doctor to find industrial causation. So make sure to let your attorney know right away if you're experiencing pain in a different part that you believe is from your claimed part, and exactly why you believe that that is from the claimed part. I hope you liked this video. If you did, press like. If you have a work injury and would like to see other videos that show about the work comp process or mistakes to avoid or things to do, press subscribe and hit the bell for our Tuesday notifications for our videos. And please keep in mind, as always, this is general information. If you need information specific to your case, give us a call or text us consult and we'll be happy to speak with you. If you have an injury but you're not sure, is this from work? Is it not from work? Maybe you're feeling pain in a body part, but you're not sure if it's just you getting old, as they say, or if it's from work. Give us a call and we'll be happy to go through that with you and examine the details of your case and tell you if you do have a case or whether we don't think you have a case. So give us a call or text us consult and we'll be happy to talk to you about that issue as well. Thank you. Goodbye.